Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Laura Flanders Show, a TV and radio program that shines a light on the solutions of tomorrow today. We report on the people and movements driving systemic change from the worlds of politics, arts, and entrepreneurship. Welcome. The midterm elections of 2022 failed to produce the red wave that history and so many pundits predicted. With democracy itself on the ballot and more dark money than ever being spent, voters managed to cast millions of votes against extremist candidates in favor of bodily autonomy, against slave prison labor, and in favor of history-making candidates, including the first woman governors in Arkansas and New York, and the first woman and out lesbian governor from any place in Massachusetts. Maryland elected its first black governor, California and Illinois their first Latinx senators. Vermont finally elected a woman to statewide office, yay, and New Hampshire will send the first trans man. Florida will send the first Gen Zer, and the first Alaskan native ever elected to Congress, Mary Peltola, is leading in her re-election race. Still, election 2020 was no cakewalk. Voters of color, the old, the young, native voters, they all faced especially onerous new voting rules. Many of us found ourselves in newly designed districts, and everywhere there were non-stop ads telling everybody lies. For this post-election roundtable, we have convened some experts. Sakira Cook, the Co-Interim Vice President of Color of Change, works to overhaul the criminal justice system and safeguard democracy, as she puts it. Jacqueline DeLeón is an enrolled member of the Isleta Pueblo and is an attorney with the Native American Rights Fund, where she leads the Native American Voting Rights Practice Group. And Heidi Sieck is the co-founder of Vote Pro-Choice, a longtime organizer in the reproductive and feminist movement for the last 30 years. What did frontline democracy defenders face, and what did they learn? Let me come to all of you first with an initial question about what were your fears and who was top of your mind as you went into these midterms this week. Let's start with you, Jacqueline.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. We had, for the first time, over 40 poll watchers across Indian country monitoring races in especially tight states. It has been a historically tight election year. While our numbers aren't relatively very large, we are situated in key states like Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, where our votes can really make a difference. And where our votes can make a difference, we expected to see difficulty accessing the polls and difficulties with disinformation. And that's exactly what we did see. As the poll watchers reported, there were many structural issues, distances to polls, lack of residential addressing that made getting a ballot difficult, trouble with recognizing tribal IDs that hindered some Native voters throughout the country.
Talk about your groups that you were watching, Sakira. What were you particularly concerned about going in?
Color of Change has been working on a number of the issues that Jacqueline named, especially around mis and disinformation proliferated online. And as we've seen with the recent takeover on Twitter, the incitement around hate speech and violence and discouragement around the election has shot up significantly. So that was one of our major concerns. We were also watching very closely some of the rhetoric around crime, right? Public safety has been a major topic of discussion because of the both real and sometimes imagined spikes in crime across the country. But what we were hopeful about and what I think we did see is that progressive policies and individuals, whether they're prosecutors, mayors, governors, or legislators in many capacities who were for transforming the criminal legal system in many places were successful. And voters rejected tough on crime rhetoric as part of this election, which is something we are very excited about. And I think will give a boost to the work that we will continue to do around transforming the criminal legal system.
On abortion and reproductive justice, Heidi, it wasn't just the candidates, it was also ballot measures having to do with bodily autonomy and reproductive rights that were up for bitter attack and misrepresentation in this race. What were you watching most closely?
Vote pro-choice has been around because we knew that there wasn't enough support for the concept of abortion as a foundational issue. And this year, we underestimate the impact of the Supreme Court overturning a foundational right to body autonomy for half of the population, plus all of their families. And so the amount of mobilization that abortion was inspiring voters was underestimated and unsupported at scale. So that is what was most concerning to us, is because we knew that this was an activating issue. And we also saw across the board a failure to invest in mobilizing folks that were really angry about this. I mean, we underestimate the impact of the overturn of Roe at our peril.
Let's go to that very question, Heidi. We had a lot of critics of Democratic candidates saying, voters had economics on the front of their mind, not abortion. We're not sure that this bet on abortion, as limited as you've just described it, as a motivating factor, will really play out. That was driving me crazy, and I'm sure it was you too. Why?
Well, here's the thing. We know across the board that 75% of this country does not want their elected officials making decisions about their body autonomy or their pregnancies. Bottom line, always has been that way. That's what the United States of America is all about. So we've got to have that baseline in our minds. But when folks say economy or abortion, that is just an absolute misunderstanding of what we're talking about. Abortion is an economic issue. The economy is a reproductive justice issue. They are combined, connected, and totally 100% inseparable from each other. Because you talk about, you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills, how you're going to pay your fill your gas tank, how you're going to afford groceries. Do you know what's so expensive and people are worried about being able to afford? It's having children against your will, accessing healthcare, like driving multiple states to access safe reproductive health care. It's not disconnected. And so that is something that I have, for the 30 years that I've been involved in the reproductive rights, health, and justice movement, that's always been very frustrating to me.
Another kind of, standard thought, conventional wisdom, particularly in democratic circles, Sakira, has been that demographics are destiny, that as the population becomes more diverse, racially, ethnically, and younger, we'll see a sort of drift in favor of reform candidates and for progressives. Has that played out? Did that play out this time?
In the places that we've been watching, I would say yes. And there were some key races where an ex-public defender was just elected to be the DA. Some Senate races where there were tough on crime candidates who were very vocal about those views, and the opposing progressive candidate won in those races. So I think it is true that tough on crime or soft on crime rhetoric has always circled around elections, but voters, again, I think rejected in many places that idea. And it's because people understand, right? There is broad support for things like marijuana legalization, right? Upwards of 70% of people across the country. Broad support for removing barriers to reintegration for people coming out of prison, whether it's voting, whether it's economic barriers with employment or education. Broad support for changing the way that we sentence in this country, right? And reducing the prison population. And no amount, in my view, of rhetoric is going to stop people from believing what they know is true. And that's mainly because I think there is less stigma right? The work that we've done over decades to destigmatize the criminal legal system and anyone's history with respect to the criminal legal system. And people are now talking about their family members who have been incarcerated and are reconnecting with them more publicly and speaking more vocally about those things in churches and community centers and in educational settings.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing it's not just kind of the magic of demographics, but the actual hard work of education that's made a difference.
Absolutely.
There was an interesting race in Oklahoma where a member of the Cherokee Nation, the right conservative guy, thought that they were going to see a great turnout by Native voters. That's not what happened. That's not even who he was endorsed by. Can you talk about what happened there? And what about this sort of cynical approach to demographics as destiny?
So I think demographics as destiny definitely has its limits. Native Americans have long been here, and both parties have, unfortunately, and all movements have ignored Native voters. There are many causes that Native Americans align with. Whether it be resource issues or others that I think there are votes that are being left on the table across America. What we saw in Oklahoma was, Governor Stitt is a Cherokee Nation tribal member, yet he has had, incredibly anti-Indian policies. He has challenged tribal jurisdiction. He has refused to renew tribal gaming compacts, and for the first time ever, more than five tribes in Oklahoma have endorsed his opponent.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. You're listening to our panel featuring frontline grassroots activists whom we've assembled to talk about the state of our democracy in light of the 2020 midterms. Our conversation took place the day after Election Day as the final results were yet to be tallied. My guests are Jacqueline DeLeón of the Isleta Pueblo Nation, an attorney at the Native American Rights Fund, or NARF, Sakira Cook, Co-Interim Vice President and Senior Director of Government Affairs at Color of Change, and Heidi Sieck, co-founder and CEO of Vote Pro Choice. You can watch this episode as well as listen, on YouTube or on over 300 public television stations across the country. Just go to lauraflanders.org to find the station nearest you. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter to receive information on our web events and audio exclusives and the release of our uncuts, including our uncut conversation with Philadelphia's DA, Larry Krasner, on the fight for criminal justice reform and why it's the civil rights battle of our time. Next, I ask our guests to share what they heard on Election Day. But first, here's Can't Stop the Movement by Groove Junkies and Scott Kay, featuring Steve Connell, courtesy of Morehouse Recordings.
You can't stop the movement. You can't stop the movement. You can't stop the movement. You just change the moves. Everybody that's living got something to prove, got something to lose, and if you don't, you're dead. The movement of daily life is choreographed by the music in our heads. It's our hearts beating, it's our lungs breathing, it's the frustration, the irritation, the elation, the confusion in our brains. It's the heartache, the winter, summer, joy, pain. It is the blood, guts, and glory. It is the same old story. And if you really want to live, well then it all just goes with the territory.
It's still too early to tell what's going to happen in Alaska. And we should say that at the time we're recording this, it is still too early to tell about the final control over either the House or the Senate. There are lots of votes still up for grab, most notably Georgia at this moment looks pretty certainly headed for a runoff. As we turn to the question of learnings, I don't want to present a picture that everything was just fine on the democracy front. And coming back to you, Jacqueline, I mean, there were concerted efforts through legislation over the last 2 to 4 years to make it harder for Native voters to cast a vote, exploiting exactly those infrastructure challenges that you described. Did you hear stories on campaign, on Election Day from the campaigns that you want to share?
Absolutely. So NARF has been fighting for a long time against laws that are aimed at capitalizing on the infrastructure failings in Indian country. So at the end of the day, we don't have residential mail delivery to so many of our homes. We don't have working roads when the election is in November during the winter time. We have incredible distances that we have to travel in order to get to county seats, in order to access registration services. We don't have the access to the type of IDs. Getting to the DMV is 50 miles away. These type of absurd realities are exploited when you have laws that are designed to make it more difficult for Native Americans specifically to vote. And we know that it was Native Americans specifically that were targeted because they had actual returns at the ballot box. So in a place like Montana, where John Tester has been credited with flipping that seat to a Democrat seat, we have seen an absolute campaign against Native votes. We have had to spend the last, almost 4 years battling against Montana laws, specifically a ban on ballot collection when Native Americans don't have residential delivery to their homes, and access to a post office can be incredibly far, and access to dropping off a ballot can be incredibly far. We had to have the state court find that ballot restriction unconstitutional twice. And they also banned same-day election day registration.
I want to echo what Jacqueline said about infrastructure, lack of infrastructure, and the long-term failure to invest in our political ecosystem and infrastructure. The same infrastructure that was able to overturn Roe using state and local investment is also the exact same infrastructure that is passing these anti-democracy legislation. The Ohio right to life is also the infrastructure that was oppressing voters in Ohio. And even we look in North Carolina, the Senate race we should have won. When you talk to Black voters in North Carolina, they will tell you no campaign talked to them at all. That is malpractice. That is democracy malpractice.
There's also been this kind of undercurrent of intimidation. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looked like in the areas that you were watching? Because we were watching some races, North Carolina, Georgia, where there were real intimidation at the polls.
So these aren't new tactics, right? Voter discrimination and limiting access to the ballot has been a longstanding problem in the African-American community in the United States for years, for decades, for centuries, maybe even, right? And what we saw is anti-voter laws, as Heidi mentioned, proliferated since 2020. Since 2020. And that is one layer. But the other layer is the mis and disinformation that's, I think, spurns, right? That type of intimidation and threatening tactics that people like to use at the polls. Investment in voter infrastructure is critical. If you don't have poll workers who know the laws, who understand the laws, and there's proper training for them, if you don't have expanded access where you can vote pretty much anytime you need to, up until the last minute on the election day. I live in Washington, D.C. I moved recently from one ward to another ward. I was able to go to any voting center in Washington, D.C. in order to vote. It didn't matter where I lived in the city. And yes, Washington, D.C. is not a state, it's not a large place, but actually has a large population comparable to many states. What we see is the opposite in many states, especially sort of right-wing extremist states who try to limit access to voter freedom because they know that the demographics and the education around all of the issues are not on their side.
We have heard this over and over again. I mean, what you just said about this being particularly criminal justice reform being the civil rights movement of our time. That's what Larry Krasner, one of the district attorneys that has been so in the crosshairs, told us just a week ago on this program, speaking from Philadelphia. In Georgia, the show that we did about what went into the victories of 2020 emphasized exactly what you're all talking about. So I want to move to learnings. Like, what actually do we need to learn from this experience? And maybe it's not we who have to do the learning, but some other people. One of the questions that I hear a lot, and one of the issues that we talk about a lot on this program is siloing of issues. Heidi, you've talked about siloing economics from, bodily autonomy. Really? We also have heard a lot about kind of siloing Native issues from issues of the environment, from issues of green energy. And yet every time we do a show on the subject, we hear how integrated those are and how important tribal sovereignty is to a sort of sustainable future. Jacqueline, coming to you on that, are there candidates who have you excited out there, leaders that have you excited that maybe won or are on the verge of winning by not siloing their issues away?
Well, I think we see in Alaska a perfect example of how a candidate can unite a diverse demographic and talk about, sustainable issues while also integrating the Native vote. So, Mary Peltola talked a lot about salmon. That was her campaign issue. She understands that there's a lot of ways that you can respect tribal interests while also campaigning for broader rights. And I think that appealing to Native voters on the issues is actually key to winning their votes. It's not really rocket science, right? At the end of the day, it's understanding that Native voters have a legitimate and really necessary in today's demographics and today's tight races, a voice that they can contribute and appealing to their broad range of interests.
Early in the night, one of the results that got me feeling a little bit more cheery was when I saw that out of Florida's 10th district, the old district of Val Demings, you had a Working Families Party endorsed young man, 25 years old, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who ran on a reimagining justice platform, among other things, and came out ahead handily. Any thoughts about this sort of new crop of candidates, Sakira, that's coming up? I know he wasn't alone running on that platform and succeeding. And let's not forget on the ballot measures, Ohio voted for bail reform. They weren't the only one. There were also ballot measures ending finally the practice of allowing unpaid labor, basically slave labor by people who are incarcerated.
Absolutely. For years, elected officials have repeatedly proposed the same old solutions that continually fail to keep communities safe. And so newly elected officials need to lean in on evidence-based solutions that are proven to increase public safety and enhance policing reform measures in particular. Safety solutions that don't focus, like I said, on criminalization or incarceration as the primary lever of change, but really recognize, to your earlier point, the intersectionality between education and economic opportunity and social supports, right, and family supports as part and parcel of what happens and how we respond to crime. I think many of these candidates who have run on those platforms, right, of positive, progressive reforms have to ensure that they stand up for those things once they get into office and lean into them, even in the face of adversity that will come.
Yeah, we're none of us going to pretend that it's going to be a cakewalk for anybody in the next 2 years. And that good candidate, Maxwell Frost, he said a beautiful thing where he said, what's needed is all the things all the time. I think he was quoting his band leader. Heidi, coming to you, I mean, you are up against it. The people that you care about, the issues that you care about, reproductive autonomy, bodily autonomy, we're up against it.
Yes. Two things is you look at what the young people did. Look at that. This is about the young people have mobile. They know what's at stake. They're worried about their futures. They're worried about their body autonomy. They're worried about the climate. They showed up. Over the course of the last 7 years, we have supported over 1,500 down ballot races. We had 560 of them this cycle. These are school boards, criminal legal positions. These are critical leadership pipelines. And let me tell you what we've seen over the years, the most inspiring part of democracy, why I don't lose hope and why I continue to stay connected, is there are women, people of color, Black women, young people who are stepping up and running in all of these races, school boards and mayors and city councils. and they are engaged, but we have to make sure that we're paying attention to supporting these races because they're going to be our future leaders. And as we look to the future, lessons learned, look there. In 2023, there's going to be over 94,000 open seats on the ballot. We get so obsessed with these federal elections. No, the real community policy happens at the school board level. Like in North Carolina, we supported some school board races where there were folks running against other GOP-supported candidates who wanted to ban books and had anti-trans policies on their docket. Like, no. We need to be focused on that. And we have so much opportunity this year to do that. And Maxwell Frost is the beginning. And there are so many more Maxwell Frosts out there that are actually stepping up and running for more local races. And that's where I want our focus to be as we prepare for 2023 and 2024.
What do you think the story will be that the future tells of this moment? And let's start with you, Heidi, briefly, 30 seconds.
We are a pro-choice nation, always have been. We have a community, a country that understands that it's the autonomy. People say, oh, it's the economy. No, it's the autonomy.
Love it. Sakira, to you.
Redefining public safety is a winnable issue. If you run on transforming the criminal legal system and run on creating a better alternative to incarceration and criminalization, people will be with you and they will always stand up for you. And that's down the ballot and up the ballot.
Jacqueline.
Democracy is for every American citizen, and that at the end of the day, if you include the weakest, if you include the most disenfranchised, you will have an inclusive and promising America. If you exclude and cheat your way out of including the people, all the American people, democracy will lose.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you, Sakira Cook from Color of Change, Jacqueline DeLeón from the Native American Rights Fund, Heidi Sieck from Vote Pro-Choice. Thanks for joining me. For more information on this week's guests, check out our episode notes posted at patreon.com/The LF Show. This background briefing, as I call it, includes links to related articles and past episodes from our archives to explore. It's also where you'll find an invitation to watch the premiere of every week's show on our YouTube channel and chat in real time with me. That's Sundays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. It's also where you can make a difference by becoming a monthly Patreon partner of this program. If every one of our dedicated, forward-thinking listeners like you committed just a few dollars a month, we'd have a solid financial foundation to continue to do this work. So what do you say? Think of it as the cost of a cup of coffee once a month, or just of doing business with the media that helps you do yours? Listeners like you make this show possible. Go to patreon.com/The LF Show and join our team by becoming a Patreon partner, or make a one-time donation at lauraflanders.org/donate. Thanks for listening. This show is produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, along with Sabrina Artel, Nat Needham, David Newman, Rory O'Connor, Alicia Duque, Jeanette Hernandez, and Jeannie Hopper. Major funding for this program is provided by the Novo, Park, Ellen Poss Family, Hisuku Wilson Foundations, the Schumann Media Center, Rising Fund at Tides, Kim Connor and Nick Groombridge, Jane Fonda, and listeners like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for your ideas. Stay kind. Stay curious. Until the next time, I'm Laura.